Betrayal and emotional wounds. Alyssa never imagined that a single photo on Facebook could shatter her heart so completely. The image of her parents beaming on a sun-drenched beach, the blue ocean stretching out behind them, their smiles radiant yet cruel in her eyes. Her heart clenched as the realization hit her. The family trip wasn't postponed. It was only postponed for her. Everything seemed to collapse right where she stood, and a wave of pain surged through her, washing away every ounce of trust she had once placed in her family. But this wasn't the first time she felt abandoned. Memories from the past flooded back, piecing together a mosaic of neglect she had endured throughout her childhood. Alyssa remembered her 10th birthday. Sitting in the living room, eyes glued to the clock on the wall as each minute passed in silence. Her parents had promised to throw her a birthday party, but they never made it home on time. When they finally walked in with a stale store-bought cake, their apologies were drowned out by laughter as they reminisced about the party they had attended with family friends. "You understand, don't you, Alyssa?" her mom asked, her eyes never leaving her phone. Alyssa had nodded, forcing a smile to avoid making them feel uncomfortable. It was just one of countless times she was treated like a shadow in her own family. Jake, her older brother, was always the center of attention. Everything revolved around him. Extravagant birthday parties, summer vacations tailored to his preferences, and expensive gifts Alyssa never dared to dream of. When Jake achieved high grades, her parents threw huge celebrations. When Alyssa matched his achievements, they gave a half-hearted compliment before shifting the conversation to something more interesting, usually about Jake. The pain wasn't just about being left out. It was the feeling of being subtly yet cruelly rejected, as if she was never good enough to be truly valued. She gave everything to make them proud. She excelled in school, was obedient, even took extra shifts at the cafe to help with family expenses. She convinced herself that if she worked hard enough, if she was perfect enough, they would finally see her, love her the way they loved Jake. But that day never came. Now, staring at the pictures on social media, her parents laughing joyfully, Jake grinning beside his girlfriend, Alyssa faced a painful truth. They didn't need her. They never did. She was just an option, an accessory when it was convenient. But this time, they decided not to bother pretending. They chose to leave her out without any concern for her feelings, without an apology, without even a flimsy excuse. Alyssa felt anger rise within her, hot and consuming. But behind that anger was a deep ache. The pain of a child who always longed to be loved and accepted, but was only met with indifference and deceit. The Facebook photo was merely the tipping point, exposing a truth she had denied for years. She was never truly part of this family. The memories of being left behind layered themselves in her mind, intensifying the hurt. But this time, she didn't want to suffer in silence anymore. This time, Alyssa knew she needed to stand up for herself, to reclaim her worth, no matter the cost. Realization and self-liberation. Alyssa sat on her bed, the light from her phone illuminating her tear-streaked face. The Facebook photos were still vivid in her mind, carving the pain even deeper. But at last she put her phone down, her hands trembling, her heart aching as if being squeezed. She sat there in the silence of her room, enveloped by an overwhelming emptiness. She was used to being left behind, but this time was different. This betrayal was blatant and merciless. There was no room for excuses or justifications anymore. The blatant lie about the postponed trip stripped away the comforting illusions. They didn't want her there. And she wasn't even important enough to be told the truth. Alyssa stared blankly at the white wall, memories crashing down on her like violent waves. She recalled her 15th birthday, waiting all afternoon for her parents to come home and cut the cake with her. But they showed up late, drunk from a party with family friends. They laughed about the delicious food and interesting conversations, oblivious to the fact that they had missed their own daughter's birthday. Alyssa had laughed along, hiding her sadness behind a mask of strength. For the first time, Alyssa questioned why she had to do that. Why did she have to be strong when the people who were supposed to love her hurt her the most? She realized that her whole life, she had tried to be the perfect daughter, the one who never complained, who always pleased her parents, and who never demanded anything. She believed that if she was good enough, obedient enough, They would finally see her worth. But now, she felt like a fool for ever believing that. Anger surged within Alyssa, but this time it wasn't just anger at her family. She was angry at herself for allowing them to hurt her over and over again. She had put them above herself, sacrificed her own happiness just to receive scraps of affection from them. But in the end, she was still the one left behind. The pain and anger merged into a fierce resolve. Alyssa realized that if she kept waiting for their validation, she would remain trapped in this cycle of hurt and disappointment. It was time to free herself. She stood up, her eyes red, but her heart feeling lighter than ever before. For the first time in her life, Alyssa understood that she didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. She didn't need their acceptance to validate her self-worth. She deserved to be loved, not because she was perfect, but because she was herself. Alyssa decided not to call or text them. She wouldn't apologize for feeling hurt, nor would she explain her silence. This time, she would let them face the consequences of their actions. She would no longer be the one to fix everything, to apologize even when she did nothing wrong. By staying silent, Alyssa set her first boundary. She was no longer the shadow in the family. She no longer waited to be seen or loved. She was learning to love herself and to put herself first. And with that resolve, Alyssa began her journey of self-discovery, one step at a time, stronger than ever before. Growth and self-affirmation. Alyssa felt as if she had stepped out of an invisible cage that had trapped her for years. For the first time, she didn't rush to apologize, didn't try to explain, and didn't blame herself for feeling hurt. She chose silence. But silence was not weakness. It was her liberation, her way of reclaiming control over her life. At first, the silence was terrifying. She was used to being the fixer, the one who mended all relationships. But now, she no longer wanted that responsibility. She had spent too much time and effort trying to be the perfect daughter. But that perfection was never enough to make them love her the way they loved Jake. One afternoon, as the sunset painted the sky gold, Alyssa sat on her porch steps, watching the clouds drift by. She recalled all the times she had been left behind. But she no longer sought excuses for them. She saw the truth. They never chose her. With a newfound determination, Alyssa booked a solo trip, not to escape the pain but to find herself. Standing on the beach, the ocean breeze in her hair, she felt truly free for the first time. In that moment, Alyssa realized she didn't need to be part of their family to feel worthy. She didn't need to beg for love or acceptance. She was enough, just by being herself. With a proud, liberated smile, Alyssa turned away from the ocean and began her new journey, a journey of freedom, self-love, and reclaiming her true worth. Change and healing in the family. Alyssa was ready to leave the past behind and move forward, but she never expected her silence to shake her family to its core. At first, there were missed calls, then text messages from her mother. "Alyssa, I'm worried about you. Are you okay?" She read them but didn't reply. Alyssa knew her mother wasn't truly worried about her. She was worried that Alyssa's silence would shatter the fragile peace they had maintained for so many years. But then the messages grew more sincere. "Alyssa, I miss you. I was wrong. Can you give me a chance to explain?" She read each word, her heart softening just a little. She had longed to hear these words countless times before, but now that they were here, they felt strangely distant. When she returned from her solo trip, a journey that had been more healing than she could have ever imagined, Alyssa wasn't surprised to find her parents waiting at her front door. She stood at a distance, watching her mother clutching her handbag as if it were her last lifeline. Her father stood beside her, his face pale and anxious. A part of her felt a pang of pity. But Alyssa quickly reminded herself that this was not the time to waver. She had fought hard to be strong, and she wasn't about to fall apart now. She walked up to the door, unlocked it without saying a word, and stepped inside, letting them follow behind her. There were no fake smiles, no forced pleasantries, only a heavy silence as she sat down and looked at them with steady eyes. "I want the truth." "Only the truth?" Alyssa demanded, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. Her mother began to cry, tears streaming down her face, but Alyssa didn't feel manipulated this time. She was done carrying the weight of everyone else's emotions while her own were ignored. She had chosen to love herself, and no one would guilt her into feeling otherwise. Her father sighed, his eyes weary but sincere. "We were wrong, Alyssa. We always thought you were strong and independent, that you didn't need us the way Jake did. But that was just an excuse for our neglect." He paused, his voice breaking. "We were selfish. We chose the easier path, ignoring your feelings so we wouldn't have to face the fact that we were unfair, and we hurt you." Alyssa felt a tightness in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. For the first time, they admitted their mistakes without offering excuses. They weren't asking for instant forgiveness. They were acknowledging the pain they had caused. Her mother's voice trembled. "I know an apology can't fix everything, but I want to try, if you'll give me a chance." Alyssa looked into her mother's eyes and saw the sincerity she had longed for all these years. But she also knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily. "I can't forgive you right now, and I don't know if I'll ever forget," she said, her voice steady. "But I'll give you a chance, because I deserve a real family, not one built on lies and abandonment." Her parents nodded, their eyes red but full of hope. Alyssa understood this was just the first step in a long journey of healing. But at least they were willing to walk beside her instead of leaving her behind as they always had. Alyssa stood up, looking at them one more time before saying, "If you want me in your life, you have to accept the truth and change. I won't accept any more lies or half measures." For the first time, her parents didn't offer excuses or justifications. They simply nodded, accepting her terms. And that was the beginning of change. Alyssa felt as if a massive weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She hadn't fully forgiven them, but she was willing to give them a chance. Not because they deserved it, but because she deserved a real family. Even if it meant rebuilding it from scratch, she was strong enough to set boundaries and demand the respect she always deserved. This wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a new journey. A journey of forgiveness, change, and most importantly, a journey of Alyssa reclaiming her self-worth and learning to love herself. Choosing herself, instead of begging for love. Alyssa knew that the conversation that day was just the start. She wasn't under any illusions that everything would change overnight. The wounds that had scarred her soul for so many years wouldn't heal with just one apology. But for the first time, her parents had truly listened. And that gave her a glimmer of hope. Not hope that everything would be perfect, but hope for real change. She decided to set clear boundaries. She would no longer be the fixer, the peacemaker, or the shadow standing behind Jake. She once feared that letting go of these roles would mean losing her family, but now she realized that if she didn't protect her self-worth, the relationship was meaningless anyway. Alyssa began to focus on herself. She attended therapy sessions to process the emotional wounds that had festered for so long. She reconnected with friends, joined yoga classes, and pursued personal interests she had once suppressed. She rebuilt her self-esteem, no longer seeking her parents' approval to validate her worth. She also set strict boundaries with her family. She told them she needed time and space to heal. She would no longer respond to guilt-tripping phone calls or manipulative messages. If they were truly willing to change, they would have to prove it with actions, not just words. One Sunday afternoon, her mother called, her voice pleading. "Alyssa, why aren't you answering my texts? Don't you care about this family anymore?" Once, those words would have filled her with guilt. But now, Alyssa calmly replied, "I care about this family, but I also need my space. I'll respond when I'm ready. Please respect that." For the first time, Alyssa expressed her needs without fear of the consequences. Alyssa also set boundaries during face-to-face meetings. If conversations became hurtful, she would change the subject or walk away. She would no longer tolerate being compared to Jake or endure thoughtless comments that shattered her self-esteem. Once, her father casually remarked, "I wish you could be more like your brother." Alyssa took a deep breath, stood up and said, "I'm not Jake. I won't sit here and be compared. When you're ready to respect me for who I am, we can continue this conversation." Then she walked out, leaving her father in stunned silence. Alyssa realized she had the right to protect her mental health, and that didn't mean she loved her family any less. She still loved them, but she wouldn't allow them to control her emotions anymore. By maintaining her boundaries, Alyssa felt freer and stronger. She was no longer the peacemaker or the people pleaser. She had the right to be herself, to be loved without having to change or hide any part of who she was. With that unwavering resolve, Alyssa continued her journey, stronger than ever before. The powerful message: choosing yourself over begging for love. Alyssa's story is a testament to the power of choosing yourself. She realized that her worth wasn't determined by her family's acceptance or approval. She didn't need to beg for love or validation. She was enough, just as she was. Her journey inspired others to set boundaries, to prioritize their well-being without guilt, and to seek self-love without needing anyone's permission. If you've ever felt left behind or unworthy, Alyssa's story serves as a reminder that sometimes walking away from toxic relationships is the only way to reclaim your self-worth. Alyssa's story is a powerful message of self-love, resilience, and the courage to break free from emotional chains. It encourages us to shine our own light, to walk our own path, and to choose ourselves, because we are worthy of love and respect, not out of pity or obligation, but out of genuine, unconditional love. This isn't just Alyssa's story, it's a story of liberation and healing that resonates with anyone who has ever struggled to find their place in a world that didn't see their worth. Alyssa's journey of healing and self-acceptance. Alyssa knew that setting boundaries was only the first step on her journey to healing. She needed to confront the deep wounds that had accumulated over the years, and this required professional support. She decided to continue therapy, not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to admit she needed help. In American culture, therapy is no longer taboo, but has become a way to take care of mental health and grow as a person. Alyssa wanted to free herself from the emotional burdens her family had unintentionally placed on her shoulders. Once a week, Alyssa sat in the comfortable leather chair in her therapist's office, facing the counselor. The room was bathed in warm, soothing light, giving her a sense of safety and peace. Here, she could take off all the masks she had worn for so many years to please others. She could be honest with herself, without fear of judgment. Some sessions were filled with tears, as she recounted the pain of feeling abandoned and betrayed when she saw her family vacationing without her. Other times she choked up, remembering forgotten birthdays, broken promises, and the feeling of never being good enough in her parents' eyes. Her therapist listened without interruption, allowing Alyssa to release all the pent-up emotions. She realized that acknowledging her pain was the first step toward healing. Alyssa also learned to build her self-esteem without depending on others' approval. In the past, she had lived to please her family, believing that if she were perfect enough, obedient enough, they would love and accept her. But now, she understood that her worth did not depend on others' validation. She learned to assert herself, to say no when necessary, and to love herself without feeling guilty. An essential part of her therapy was learning to manage her emotions when facing her family in the future. Alyssa knew there would be times when her parents wouldn't understand the boundaries she had set. There would be times they would try to pull her back into her old role, the compliant daughter who never complained. But now Alyssa was prepared. She learned to take deep breaths, stay calm, and not let their emotions dictate her decisions. Alyssa was learning to control her emotions without feeling the need to please anyone. She understood that healing was a long process, sometimes easy, sometimes difficult, but the most important thing was that she was moving forward. After each session, Alyssa walked out of the therapist's office, feeling lighter, stronger. She was no longer the weak girl who begged for love from her family. She was slowly building a stronger version of herself. A confident, independent woman who was no longer afraid to put herself first. And on that journey, Alyssa knew she was not only healing herself but also building a solid foundation for all her future relationships. She was learning to love and respect herself before expecting anyone else to do the same. Continue to be strong and committed to your journey. Alyssa had embarked on a path of self-healing and self-affirmation, but she knew this journey wouldn't be easy. There would be days when she felt vulnerable, days when old memories would flood back like a storm, tempting her to return to her family's embrace even though she knew it would hurt her again. But Alyssa chose herself, a difficult but powerful choice. In American culture, where individual values and autonomy are highly regarded, Alyssa realized that she had the right to live her own life without conforming to anyone's expectations, including her family's. She no longer had to be the mediator, no longer had to stand in Jake's shadow, or sacrifice herself for approval. She had the right to define herself on her own terms. There were moments when Alyssa felt like giving up, especially when her parents tried to reach out with guilt-ridden messages. Family is the most important thing. Why would you want to distance yourself from us? In the past, these words would have melted her resolve.